Yes, troops, welcome back to episode 37 of the Real Life Podcast. We've got a very special guest on today, Martin Melly, who is an operations coordinator for Men Matter Scotland, a mental health charity, and is also a host of the 20 Minute Tims podcast. Thanks for coming on, Martin. How are you, mate?
I'm all good, mate. Thanks for having me, guys.
I'm excited, man. I'm excited. I love, obviously, mental health is a big thing uh, in Scotland. It's a massive thing, and obviously you're a big part of it. But one thing we kind of like to start off with is just kind of talking about your own journey with mental health. Obviously, you're now working in the mental health sector. I volunteer with the same charity. I work
Yes.
alongside you, and it's an amazing thing that Men Matter are doing. But obviously, we all kind of have our own journey. So would you be willing to share a bit on your own mental health journey and how you kind of got to the point of actually working for a charity?
Yeah, no problem, mate. So around this time, 6 years ago, I was really struggling with my own mental health. I was going through a year-long battle with deep depression. In the lead up to that, when I turned 30, my dad had been diagnosed with cancer, and just as after I turned 30, he passed away. From that point onwards, I took it upon myself, being the older out myself and my brother. There's also my mum, that I was the sort of man of the house and had to look after my mum, had to try and help my brother. And to be honest, I didn't look after myself during that. So I was just what I'd probably call a normal guy for Glasgow. Worked all week, went out the weekend, and just kept that on repeat. Was obviously struggling with the grief of my dad, but I didn't speak to him there about it. I didn't do anything about it. I just bottled it all up, and I thought that everything would be fine. So my dad get buried in the August, and I just sort of plodded on from there. It got to the start of the next year, and I thought, you know what, this year will be better. It'll all be good. And then a couple of months into the year, my brother, who's only 2 years younger than me and him sort of bounced off each other with about my dad. He decided he was moving to China. So he moved to China. I hadn't heard of the place he decided to go, but I'm guessing everybody now will know what it is. It was Wuhan, so where the pandemic kicked off. So I'd never heard of this place anyway. He went over there, and I thought, "Do you know what, brilliant. I'm happy for him. All good with that. He's off there living his life. Everything will be all right." Just kept plodding along, doing the same things. And then a few months later, my mum came in one day and could just tell something was up by the look on her face. And she said, "I've been diagnosed with cancer." So again, I was just like, "I'll be fine. I'll look after you. I'll take you to the hospital and all that." And no realizing that inside I was struggling. A few weeks after that, my partner at the time, she decided that she didn't want to be with me anymore, and I couldn't understand it. But now when I look back, I can completely understand it, because I was just shut off. I wasn't there. I wasn't doing the usual stuff I did. When people, including her, MD, asked me how I was, I just dodged the question and I'd put it back on them, and I'd just find a way around it. So I was struggling inside, but not telling MD. And then when it got to that point, when my dad was gone, my mum had cancer, my brother was on the other side of the world, my partner wasn't with me anymore. That was when sort of everything fell around me and got a lot worse. I didn't know what to do, and for the first time in my life, I asked for a bit of help. And from then on, I went on. I hate the word and the journey, or whatever you want to call it. I went on a fucking year-long battle with depression, and but to be honest, it probably kicked off before that. But that just felt like that was the tip of the iceberg when things went wrong, and when those four people could potentially all be out my life, the big problem for me wasn't my relationship with those people. My big problem was my relationship with myself. I hated myself. In my head was a toxic place to be. I'd always beat myself up, and it just left me in a state where I couldn't do anything, I couldn't make decisions, and I just got deeper and deeper into depression.
Thanks for being so open, mate. On you go,
Yeah,
Kieran.
because that is, it's a very raw and honest insight to obviously a very dark and scary chapter of your life, Martin, mate, which we obviously very much appreciate you obviously sharing that kind of stuff, mate. And most people will be able to relate to a certain degree, maybe not of the circumstances that were going on. Some probably will, of course, will, but I think everyone can kind of relate to, obviously, not being in the right headspace inside your head and also shutting off from a lot of people. Even something I've noticed in my own experience, like, see, anytime I've been in a dark spot, you start to kind of mask everything out, but just stay quiet and don't actually speak your own truth. And in reality, you're kind of trying to protect the people around you, but you're pushing them further away without even realising it, mate. And again, see, listen off everything that was going on there, I always like to think that life can kind of happen in chapters, mate. And obviously that chapter would have been a hard chapter, of course, mate. But again, like, if you were maybe to like flip it on its head, and obviously we spoke about, obviously, now that you work for, obviously, Men Matter, you've got your own podcast and that kind of stuff, mate. What I always find intriguing, and this is just from my own experience with stuff that I've had going on, any of my dark past or hard struggles and that kind of stuff, when I break it down, could actually be a catalyst to where I'm currently at. Would you maybe like relate to that at all, mate?
Yeah, definitely, Kieran. For me, when I look back on it now, if I hadn't went through that, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I'm happy in life. I've got a job that I love. We still do the podcast. I've got great friends. I've got a brilliant partner. I've got a dog. I've got a great family. But I wouldn't be where I am if I hadn't went through that. And for me, it's just that sort of mindset shift. So from when I was in my darkest days, when with the depression, to when finally I got through it, and we can go through how I got through it and all that if you want. But from when I was depressed to when I got myself into a sort of content place, my life was the exact same. I still had the same job, still had the same car, still had the same mates, still stayed in the same place, still had the same hobbies. It was just my mindset that was different. I didn't beat myself up anymore. I didn't hate myself. Instead of looking at what I don't have, I was grateful for what I did have. So my life wasn't massively different, but my mindset was, and that was the sort of key to it all.
What do you think caused that shift, mate?
For me, when I first went through it, there's a pure heavy echo here, by the way.
It's echoing a bit. Sorry, Martin, you were saying there, like, what kind of lessons do you think you would pass on to others that are going through a similar struggle with their own mental health? What's the things that kind of stick out to you more than anything?
The first thing I had to do was actually talk about what was going on with me, what was going on in my head. In my 30 years previous to that, I'd never done that, whether it would be problems at primary school, problems at secondary school, problems after school, financial stuff, just stuff worrying me. I never ever spoke about it to MD, even though I had a great family, great pals. So for me, I had to learn to start being open and honest and start speaking about what was going on with me. I went at the start, I went to the doctor when things went completely wrong for me, and the doctor sort of said, here's the antidepressants and here's a leaflet for counselling. And I was in and out in 10 minutes, like, whoa, what's going on here? I didn't end up taking the antidepressants, but I phoned up the counselling and they said, look, we'll get you down for counselling, but it's going to be a 12-week waiting list. And I was like, fuck it, I don't have 12 weeks here. So I went home and spoke to my mum. She was dead supportive, and she said, look, phone them back and see if you can get counselling, and between us we'll pay for it. So I went and got counselling to start with, spoke about all this stuff, and I remember in the first session just sort of explaining to you guys what was going on. The woman, after I said to her, said, that's quite a lot in it. And I was like, oh fuck, it is quite a lot. But I didn't see it like that because I was in it and I was completely lost in it. So speaking about it helped me then. And talking to her helped me a lot, and it sort of made me feel a bit better. But a couple of months into the counselling, she came in one day and said, look, something's happened in my family. I'm going to have to take early retirement, but I suggest you continue with one of my colleagues. And I was like, nah, I feel a bit better now, man. I feel fine. This will be all good. And I did feel better, but I was a wee bit better than I was. I still had a long way to go, but I thought I'd cracked it, and I just started continuing what I was doing before and started to go downhill, and then it got to a point one day where it was sort of the worst day of my life, and from that point on, stuff happened there, and I went, right, I need to make some changes here. So I changed things around in my life, and everything started to fall into place. So I went and got CBT, which is cognitive behavioural therapy. That made me understand why I think the way I do, and then it helped me to change the way I think, which then made my behaviours change. So instead of thinking negatively, I started to tweak it to feel positively. And lo and behold, instead of ploughing myself with negative thoughts and feeling negative, I started ploughing myself with positive thoughts and I felt positive. I started getting up every morning, going for a walk straight away for 10 minutes so I could get my thoughts in order rather than sitting having breakfast or in the shower and while my thoughts are going. So I'd go for a wee walk. I always went to the gym or played football or that, but I started doing it properly and I got a PT and done it properly again because I'd had a PT before and that was when I got into the best shape and I started eating properly. I started looking after myself properly and I didn't drink from October to February. I stopped drinking because I was at rock bottom and I had to get myself into a better place. And for the first time in my life, I put 100% into something and I got the rewards of it. So talking, looking after yourself and doing all the things you need to do, running after your passions pretty much is what got me there.
There's a few wee bits that I kind of took away for that, man, which I really appreciate, man. There's, first of all, I actually wrote about this in the book. I feel like I'm talking about this book right enough, but it actually is in there, right? And we were basically speaking about how, like, I felt a bit better. So, like, I kind of went through something similar where I was dealing with, like, addiction and all that kind of stuff, right? Battling my own depression. And then I went into, I don't know if you've heard it, the Priory, which you've got in Glasgow and all that kind of stuff. I got admitted into there, mate. And it was very similar to yourself, mate, where I went in for a couple of weeks and that kind of stuff, started speaking to somebody, started speaking to a counsellor, started to feel that a wee bit better. And I remember it got to the next stage where I was like, right, do you want to continue this? I was like, nah, I feel a bit better here. And it's like that word where you go, see when you say that out loud, go, no, I feel a bit better. It's mad to think that you feel as if that should just tick the box, but you've not. You're only at the start of this journey. And see, because I did leave the Priory, I did actually stop going to the counselling. I ended up just going back the way again.
Yeah,
and
that was all the time, that.
100%, man. I think a lot of people end up going back to that because it's so normalised to be okay and not good, if that makes sense. So people just normalise feeling okay. So if they do feel a wee bit better, they're like, right, job done. And they'll just move on from it. But ultimately, as we all know, all three of us know, like, you've not actually addressed the elephant in the room. Like, what is the actual next steps? How are you going to constantly be evolving as a person? And I like the fact that you mentioned about CBT as well. So I've been with CBT for about a year. It's also inside our programme. And I like the backbone behind it, that it's all facts focused and it really does give you the power to control it.
Aye.
It's interesting. But Martin, what did you find more benefit in? Do you find more benefit in like cognitive behaviour therapy or like sitting down with a counsellor as such?
I think for me, the CBT changed my life. That changed, and the stuff I learned doing CBT I still use today. I don't know I'm doing it all the time, but it's just automatic for me that I'll be able to catch the thought instead of letting. So if I had a negative thought before, I'd let it run wild. So if I stumble here, I'll be thinking about it all night, and then I'll be beating myself up, going, "Oh, you fucking tit, look at the state of you," and then I'll think about things mistakes I've made in the past, and within 10 minutes I can hate myself. But CBT taught me to catch that thought and then change the thought, because I could think about anything else in the world. I don't need to think negatively. So it's just about that. But I think looking back, I'd never spoken before to people and I'd never talked about how I was feeling. So CBT changed my life, but I don't know if I'd have got to where I was if I hadn't done the counselling to start with. So I think it's going to be different for everybody. It depends where you are in life. I had to start speaking to get myself ready for the CBT, but it just depends where you are in life. I recommend both, but for me, CBT was what I needed to do because it was my thinking and my behaviours that was causing me a lot of the stuff. But I wouldn't have been able to do CBT if I hadn't went through the counselling as well.
I think the thing that always sticks out to me and that helped me the most was just talking, man. Like, I'm now at a point where I'm almost like addicted to talking about my mental health and stuff. Like, it just happens automatically now. Like, if someone asks me how I am, I'll just tell them like I feel a bit flat today. Whereas years ago, I would almost put a wall up and never talk about my feelings. And I would say like talking is the most important thing, man. Like, when I was at my lowest, when I was in Thailand and I had a mental breakdown, like, I never actually met you in Thailand, Kieran, and you even said, like, I look dead behind the eyes. Like, maybe not dead behind the eyes, but you could almost see like a glazed over look Like, I never looked like myself. I looked lost. And the issue was for me is that I never really spoke to anyone back home for 2 months, which is fucking mental because I feel like the worst thing you can do is isolate yourself because you end up so disconnected. You end up in your own head constantly. And I think, obviously, what you do, Martin, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I've started volunteering with Men Matter and I've seen firsthand the work that you do. Could you just give us a bit of an insight into what Men Matter actually is? Because people will hear that. People might see it on my social media. They might see me with the jumper on, but they might not even really know what it is. Could you give us a bit of a breakdown of what they do, how you can get involved, and what they're all about?
Yeah, no problem, mate. Men Matter Scotland's a mental health charity for men aged 16 and above living in Scotland. Initially, when it started out, Fraser, as you know, was one of the founding members. It started off as a dad's sort of talking group with dads in the local area, and it was a 12-week pilot project. At the end of the 12 weeks, they realised their relationships were better. They were talking about what was going on in their lives. Their kids' behaviour was getting better. So they'd meet up every week and they decided it wasn't just dads that needed it, it was men that needed it. So they started Men Matter and they used it as a peer-to-peer support group for guys struggling. At the start, it was sort of suicide intervention. They'd get people right on the edge and try and bring them back and get them going. But as you've seen over the years, we've sort of tried to make it more mental health based. So anybody that's struggling with any sort of mental health, whether it be just a bit lonely, a bit isolated, whether it's addiction, whether it's depression, anxiety, or you just need a wee change in your life, Men Matter Scotland is a free service that's open to any men over 16. So you can come in. We offer peer-to-peer support. So it's guys simply listening, man, just listening to people, because a lot of people, whether they're young or old, sometimes they feel they haven't been heard, and people say, what is it you do in Men Matter? And to be honest, I just sit there and listen, man, because there's no point me just having somebody sit there and say, I'm going through depression, and me turn around and go, I know how you feel, here's what I done, go and do that. That's not going to help anybody. What we're there to do is listen, and then we'll try and support you as we can. So we are open from Monday to Friday, from 10:30 in the morning till 9 p.m. We open on a Saturday from 10 till 4. We're based in Drumchapel at Oliver's Pub, if anybody knows that. We're in the hub behind that. So we put on mental health classes and activities throughout the week that'll help guys understand how they're thinking, understand why they feel the way they do, and ultimately it's all about moving forward. So we put on classes that will teach you about your thoughts and your thinking. We put on yoga, we put on breath work, we put on meditation, Wim Hof cold water stuff. There's all sorts of different activities there, and if you come in, we'd give you a tour of the place, sit you down, have a chat, see how we can help and take it from there. And you know the place, Ryan, we've got loads of rooms in it. So there's a music room, there's a games room with Xbox and PlayStation. We've got 4 or 5 one-to-one rooms. There's a big sitting area where people can sit and get a chat. So there's plenty going on, and if anybody wants to come, they can get in touch online on our website or Facebook, or they can just drop in and see us at any time.
It's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, mate. And like, I've seen it firsthand. I was actually like in a one-to-one with you on Friday, talking to people, and just the feeling of seeing someone vulnerable and then opening up and then feeling better instantly. It's amazing, man. And I think we really do need to shout this from the rooftops. Like I said, talking about talking, and it's so important, man. And I think obviously we're guys. We like to think we can take on the world on our own, but I think that it's honestly our worst enemy. And you see it, you feel it in yourself, you see it in other people. As soon as you start talking about your feelings, start talking about your problems, it's almost like they know that they disintegrate, but they're now out in the open. And if something's out in the open, it can be dealt with, which I just think it's amazing to see. How did you actually end up working with Men Matter?
So after I got through all my stuff, I kind of felt that I want to help people. I remember I was at the football, so I was in stadiums of like 50, 60,000 people, and I felt like the loneliest guy in the world. But after I got through that, I decided that I don't want MD to feel like I did. So I went on my pal's podcast, Sean McDonald. He's got the Blethered podcast. So he just put on Twitter one night, I've started this podcast, I'm looking to speak to people about certain things, and one of the things was depression. So I just texted him and said, look mate, I've been through depression just recently, and I can come on and talk about it if you want. And he's like, no way, I was out with you like 3-4 times in the last year and didn't have a clue. And I was like, aye, I just got the master of hiding it, mate. And even so, when I put that podcast out as well, it was quite worrying as well that Sean put that podcast out and they got a good reaction to it. But I also mentioned it on my podcast as well, said, look, I've been going through depression for the last year. I've just went on this podcast, go and have a listen to it if you want. And quite a lot of people got in touch with me, and a lot of them were saying, look, I listen to your podcast every week and I didn't have a clue you were going through that. I thought it was plain for the world to see. I thought it was in my voice, but it's no, because I wasn't telling people, I was hiding it, and I became the master of that. So after that podcast with Sean, I was like, do you know what? I think I could help people. So I went away and I done some studying, done a couple of wee courses. And Jamie, that I do the podcast with, his cousin is Peter, who was one of the guys that started Men Matter. So we sort of knew about them, and we had some podcast equipment, and we gave it to the charity. So it was always in the sort of back of my mind. But then I was just searching one day and a job came up in it, and I just went along to the job, got the interview, and then a couple of months later, that was it. Started in Men Matter, and that's been me since. So that's been about 2.5 years now.
Mate, that is, it's insane to see that what started off as like your own struggles and journey, and like a lot of people could go through all that and then like not want to, not like deal with it again, but have to face that time and time again, because obviously you understand what a lot of people are going through, and to kind of bounce off of that, not that it would open any doors or that kind of stuff, but it could be like, right, okay, you're not reliving it, but going through it over and over again, mate. So to actually take your knowledge and your experience and then literally giving that as advice and help and support for other people is just insane. And it's a testament, because like the world is very much mixed with good and bad people, man. But see, when you actually get a conversation with someone who has a very good soul and is using their own past experiences to help others, it's a very inspirational thing to see, because you could have quite easily like dealt with what you had to deal with, go on with your own life and continue. But instead of changing that and going, do you know what, actually, I'm going to put this into good use it as my own fulfillment and purpose, and really drive a better life for other people. It's very powerful, man. And also one thing that you mentioned earlier before, sorry mate, about which I think is very, very good with Men Matter, is actually having a place to go for men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like having that physical place where, as you say, mate, they can go in, they can just go fucking play music and that kind of stuff. They can sit and have a chat, man. Can just chill out and have a bit of a laugh, because although we've got the numbers that you can phone, you've got these different places, right? There's certain places that men feel that they can go, right? Obviously, this is very stereotypical. It would either be the pub, the football, maybe just like other wee places like that, go for coffee and that kind of stuff, right? Where you're ultimately just surrounded by people who don't have a clue what you're going through. But then to have a physical building where you go, right, we all understand exactly what you're going through. The back goes down. You're not worried. That shield goes down instantly, I would imagine, because you're obviously in a room surrounded by people that are going through very similar. So you become more open, and as we kind of are discussing here, you're easily led to actually speak more. Do you know what I mean?
Aye, that's it, mate. We at Men Matter, we're always told guys don't talk, and that is true. I was testament to that. I didn't talk, and it got me to where I was. But like Ryan was saying, so the usual scenario at Men Matter is somebody brand new will come in, they'll get a tour of the place by one of the volunteers. They'll then get signed up, and then they'll come into a room with one of the staff and a volunteer and have the sort of 1-to-1 or 2-on-1 chat. Now, that guy that came in and spoke to me and Ryan just opened up because the environment was there to do that. And that's what we need to do, is try and build these environments for guys to feel comfortable to talk. We hadn't met that guy 5 minutes before, yet he'll sit down and tell us everything that's going on in his life and his life story. So guys do talk if you build the environment for them to talk. So it's just about getting those environments and getting those places. And what you're saying about telling my story, I'm very careful of it, because we go out and do a lot of talks and all that, and I don't mind telling my story because I've dealt with my shit and it's fine. There's there can be people that like to live in the story, and I don't think that's healthy at all. But with my story, I think I'm fine now. I've dealt with it, and our chairman of the charity was doing a speech recently, and he said at the end of it something, and I thought, I'm going to bump that, so I should just steal it for my own without giving him credit. But he said that he'll recover loudly so somebody doesn't suffer silently. And I thought, fuck, that's it, innit? So if my 5 minutes or my story will help somebody go, do you know what, maybe I need to talk, then that's all it needs. Because like I say, I've felt like the loneliest guy in the world in a full football stadium, but I wasn't, because I went into the gym that night on the worst day of my life and told this guy who's a PT there, who I'd see every day I was in the gym, and he go, what's happening? And I just went, oh, I'm having a tough time at it now. And 10 minutes later, he's telling me he's going through depression, he's doing this, and we're helping each other out then. So I started training with him, started helping him out, he'd help me out, all because I was honest for a change instead of hiding things. So it's always best just talking about it and getting it out, and you never know who you could meet or where it can lead you to.
I think it's, like we said earlier about talking, it's just so helpful. Do you feel like, Guy, the men's mental health space is starting to change? Do you feel like men are changing their attitudes towards actually speaking out and being a bit more vulnerable?
I do, yeah. I think it's a lot more spoken about. So that was 6 years I was going through that, so there wasn't anything like Men Matter, but there is places now, it is shouted from the rooftops now that men need to talk, but that's all that's said a lot of the time. So there needs to be a sort of aftermath of that, of where you can talk. Look, there's loads of numbers, there's loads of good charity, there is help out there. If you want it, you just have to go looking for it, and sometimes we're a bit scared to go looking for it, but it's just about taking that first step. I always say to everybody in Men Matter, the hardest thing is walking through the door. The hardest thing is that first time you open up, but things do get easier after that, because if you're just stuck in your own head all the time, I could make up any scenario in my head if I just let it go for long enough, and before long I'm lost in my own head. So it's just about getting those thoughts out of your head and out into the open. Sorry, I'm rabbiting on a bit here, but I remember when we were in Men Matter once, and we were just about to start a class, and there was a guy in, and he was just chatting away to one of the other guys, and he was like, what's up with you? He's like, I've got this thing at work, and this is going on, and I just can't. He was just completely gone, and he'd been like this for like a week. And the guy was like, right, what's the problem then? And he told him, and the guy said, well, what's going to happen? He said, I'll get all this blowback, and they'll all be emailing me, and it'll all just come back on me. And he said, why don't you just make up a work email and send it from that, and put that you only work from this time to this time? And the guy was like, oh, fuck, that'll work. And that was him. A week he'd been in his own head. He couldn't see the problem anymore. All it took was for him to say to somebody, and somebody go like, why don't you try this? And he's like, oh shit, that's easy enough, isn't it? So it's just getting out of your head and into the open. You'll start to get solutions, and you'll usually find a solution yourself.
100%. I think that's it. I think you can drive yourself crazy, but as soon as you say it out loud, you then get solutions from either yourself or other people, and then you can take action on it. And I think that's why journaling has been such a great thing for me, because it's almost like having that conversation with yourself, and you're almost questioning things in your life before they happen or while they're happening, and you almost come up with a solution on yourself. And one thing I wanted to kind of ask you, obviously you've dealt with a lot of people over the years that have been struggling, and anyone that's listening and you're struggling with your mental health, first of all, I want to say, if you really are struggling, like, reach out to me, reach out to Kieran on social media. We can send you the details for Men Matter, and you can go and get help. But I think one thing that would be really useful is just, what would you say the kind of best actionable advice would be for men over the years? What have you seen the kind of best feedback from? What's helped men most when it comes to their mental health? If you could put it into like a few bullet points or a few actionable things, what would you say?
So, like when I do that 1-to-1, I'll always ask people 4 questions, because this is a sort of thing I've come up with doing so many 1-to-1s over the years. The first thing people need is, I always ask them, who do you talk to? And say they say nobody, right? Well, you need to change that for a start. Or say they say my partner, I'll go, right, okay. What happens when you argue with your partner? Who do you talk to then? Nobody. So I would like to get people to have 3 or 4 people they can talk to, whether it's their partner, whether it's a pal, whether it's a support group, whether it's whatever it is. You need 3 or 4 support networks around you. I'll then ask them, what do you do for yourself? Oh, I go fishing once a month. Right, what about the 28 other days in the month? What do you do to look after yourself? So, all right, nothing much, right? That's what we need to change. So, do you exercise? Do you eat well? Do you meditate? Do you get a proper sleep? Do you do any cold water stuff? Do you do any breath work? All the stuff that's been worked for mankind since the dawn of time is still the stuff that will work the now. Talking, exercising, meditating, all that stuff is the stuff. Then I'll ask people, what's their purpose? What's their goal, short term, long term, and see what they say then. And the last question I always ask people is, what do you think of yourself? Do you like yourself? So I think those things are connected. It's that connection and community of people you speak to. It's that self-care of what you're doing for yourself to look after yourself. It's that purpose of having goals and things you want to achieve. And it's that self-worth. If you don't like yourself, you're not going to be motivated to speak to MD. You're not going to be able to go and do exercise. You're not going to be able to find a purpose. So I think those 4 things are all interlinked, and sometimes people are missing one of them, sometimes people are missing 2 of them, sometimes they're missing 3 or 4. And if you can sort all that, you'll be fine. So if you look after yourself, if you talk to people, if you have a purpose, you'll then start to like yourself and build it up from there. But if you don't have that, you can start to struggle.
I like that, man. And it's like anyone can do that. Do you know what I mean? Anyone can break that down and go through the questions as well. What I kind of like to say, like quite a lot of my guys, I know it's not as specific as like mental health and all that kind of stuff. I always kind of talk to the guys about creating like their own confidence, and it always comes from like building that undeniable stack of evidence that they can do what they said they're going to do. And obviously that can tie in with like purpose and that stuff and their vision and their goals. Because if you are that person that says they're going to do something and you ultimately always follow through with that, like over time you are going to build that confidence. I know it's slightly different to what you were asking them, but to tie in with that last question, like what's the goals, what's the targets? If you are constantly one of these people that fall short, not the last question, sorry, the second last question, if you're one of these people that always kind of fall short with that, man, it might be the fact that you just don't stick to your word. And if you become that person that sticks to the word, then you will, again with the last question, start to actually like yourself a wee bit more, because you're proving to yourself that you can back yourself fundamentally. And I think a lot of guys can maybe relate to that, where they don't really back themselves anymore, and it's not maybe the current situation that they're in. It might be, obviously, but I think it comes down to a lot of like trust issues with themselves, because they'll say like a common one is like maybe that I'm not going to drink for X amount of time, and then the first occasion comes up, no, I've had a few babies. They kind of like lose that trust for themselves, so they start to like not like themselves as a person. So that kind of say to the guys I work with, I'm like, if you want to build up that confidence and belief in yourself, you need to like back yourself by doing the shit you said you were going to do. And that's what it all kind of elevates from. That was like just kind of my wee take on that.
It's just about realistic goals as well, innit? If you say, for start, I'm not going to drink for 6 months, well, if you drink every week and it's a social thing and then you just decide, oh, that's it for 6 months, it's going to be hard to stick to. So it's just about making achievable and realistic goals, but the goals need to be realistic, personal to you as well. A lot of the time I put my happiness on other people. I'll be all right if they're all right. Well, that's no, it's personal to me, but it makes my happiness rely on somebody else being all right. I need to be content within myself before if anything's going to work out for me.
I love that. I think one thing that we could all do better, me and Kieran were talking about this earlier, is just give yourself a bit more credit, man.
Aye.
Give yourself more credit and be a bit kinder to yourself. And I think one thing that's helped me a lot recently is like gratitude as well. Like, and like I can't even believe I'm saying that out loud, because me a few years ago would be like, you're a fucking gimp. But it's true, man. Like, be grateful for what's going on in your life. One thing I want to ask you is, obviously, you've got a really successful podcast. You've got over 400 episodes, 20-minute Tims. You've got 1,600 people on Patreon, which is massively inspiring, man. And I just want to ask you, kind of, what's the secret behind building a successful podcast?
Secret? I don't know if there's a secret, but for us, it's just consistency. We started out huddled round one microphone in my mate's spare room, sitting on the floor, shitting ourselves, despite the fact that nobody might hear it. But it was in the lead up to that, well, will we do it? Why don't we do it? It was just fear that was stopping us. And then we just went out, recorded an episode, put it out. And the next day, despite being 3 of us that do the podcast, only 2 people out the podcast listened. So one person didn't even listen to it. So we still don't know who it was. But from then, we were doing it every week, but it'd be, are we podcasting tonight? Nah, I can't tonight. Oh, right, what about tomorrow? Nah, I've got something on tomorrow. And a couple of months into it, we just decided we need to, Stephen describes it as treating it like a game of fives. Game of fives is on every week at the same time. You be there, or that's it. So we decided every Monday at around 5 o'clock we would do the podcast. If Celtic play, we do a podcast, and we've done that now for, this is 9 years we've been doing it. This is our 10th season doing it, and it's sort of grown from there. We've done different things over the years. It was a podcast, and then we'd do extra stuff. Then we get the Patreon, and we put the extra stuff onto Patreon. Then we're a bit further down the line after, when lockdown finished, we decided we were going to go to YouTube. So it's just about figuring out what you are doing and doing it. It's just finding your passion and riding it till the wheels fall off. We're 3 guys that talk about Celtic. We're pals anyway, and if we were in the pub or sitting about, we'd be watching the game or talking about Celtic anyway. So let's just record it and see where it's went. But it's just that consistency, and we don't take ourselves too serious, but we take serious what we do. So we'll sit before the podcast and have an agenda. We'll all know what we're doing that week around the podcast. So we treat it like a job, but it doesn't feel like a job.
I laughed a wee bit to see when you were saying about you would kind of see who was available on each night when you could do that. Me and Ryan were criminal for that about 3 months ago. To be fair in our behalf, but right, at one point Ryan was at the other side of the world, and then he came back, and then I went to the other side of the world, so it was a bit awkward, man. But I remember we had a conversation, and we're like, right, we fucking need to get a set date and time, man, because this is getting stressful. So it's funny you said that, because I'm like, that's where we're at. That's exactly where we're at.
I think 2 things stick out, man. Consistency and structure. You're never going to do anything good. You're never going to make any success without the 2 things, man. Consistency and structure all the way. But Martin, mate, thanks a lot for coming on, man. We really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. I love talking about mental health, and anyone that's listening, I hope you took a lot away from that. And like I said, if you're struggling, man, reach out. There's people here. There's us. There's support networks. There's Men Matter. Like, the help is there if you need it. All you need to do is just kind of take that leap and step out your comfort zone a wee bit, and you'll feel so much better for it.
But nah, before we round up, mate, I want to say thank you as well, man. I appreciate you obviously coming on, mate. I know we obviously took over a bit there with a lot on like Men Matter, which when you do break down the 2 subjects we're going to talk about, Men Matter deserves the floor more than anything, to be completely honest, man. But no, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, giving an insight. Obviously, our podcast called the Real Life Podcast. We want real honest, like, stories fundamentally, man. And I don't think you could get any more raw and honest there, Martin, mate. So, bottom of my heart, mate, really appreciate you sharing that, mate. And as always, guys, before we finish up, please share this to your stories. I'm pretty sure, Martin, if you want to drop in the handle for Men Matter, if anybody wants to follow you and any of that kind of stuff on Instagram.
Yeah, I know worries. So it's Men Matter Scotland Dogs, the website. We'll find us on Instagram and Facebook, Men Matter Scotland.
Perfect, man. Well, thank you, Troots, for listening. And if you've got any more questions to ask us around about Men Matter, obviously just drop any of us a DM, man. We'll be happy to help you out. But we'll catch you next week.